On this Friday night, another step closer to normal. Ottawa's blanket advisory against non-essential travel is gone, but PCR tests are staying for now.
The pandemic is very much alive.
Plus, the timeline on when Canada's biggest province will remove all restrictions. Fatal accident. Alec Baldwin fires a prop gun, killing this cinematographer.
Really generous, really talented, really upbeat.
The risks of film industry firearms. Rogers family feud. The high-stakes fight for a telecom giant gets messy. And they're not just in the movies anymore. They're waiting in the wings, flying cars designed by Canadians.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Sophie Louie.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. That holiday you've been dreaming about since the start of the pandemic is getting closer. For more than 19 months, we've been hunkering down. But now Ottawa is opening up travel for the vaccinated, lifting its advisory against non-essential trips. This is typically the time of year Canadians think about booking a winter getaway. But before you check for flights, health officials warn there are some factors you need to keep in mind and some forms of travel which are not advisable. And then there's the issue of affordability of your first post-pandemic vacation. A trip now includes the high cost of PCR tests required for visitors in many countries and upon your return to Canada. But a hint today that could also change down the road. Abigail Bimman has our top story tonight.
After a blanket warning against non-essential travel blanketed the global affairs site since the start of the pandemic, the agency quietly updated the website, now warning travelers should be fully vaccinated.
No, now is not the time to just freely go wherever.
Officials say you should consider your own health, the state of COVID-19, where you're going, and the type of trip you're taking. Cruise travel outside Canada is still not advised, for example. And in terms of that cumbersome and potentially expensive PCR test, Canada still requires travelers to take before entering our country.
We're in the middle of consulting with the provinces as we speak and on what the needs are for testing with regards to vaccinated travelers. I have to remind people that the pandemic is very much alive outside of Canada.
Health officials also shared a number of vaccine-related updates Friday. The National Advisory Committee on Immunization now says people who had a severe allergic reaction after a first dose can get their second shot after speaking to their doctor. They should be monitored for longer with someone familiar with anaphylaxis present.
We hope this is good news for people who've been worried about their allergic reaction.
We also got some new information on booster shots. Health Canada has submissions from both Moderna and Pfizer. And Friday, Pfizer released some clinical trial data showing an immunity boost after a third dose up to 95.6%. Full data hasn't yet been released.
But we expect to get that filed to all of the regulators shortly. So we'll look through that data, both for Pfizer and for the Moderna vaccines. And then based on that, we'll take a look at authorizations.
While there isn't yet national guidance, the initial focus for any booster shots would be on the most vulnerable, including the oldest Canadians. In general, Dr. Tam says there is still time to be thoughtful about a booster dose strategy, given most Canadians only got their second dose a few months ago. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
The Ontario government says a milestone has been reached in the fight against COVID-19. It has announced a further easing of capacity limits amid declining case counts. It's good news for the province's bars, restaurants, and gyms. There's even a target date to remove all COVID restrictions. But as Jamie Mauracher reports, some are still sounding a note of caution.
Andrei Yakovenko is eager to be fully open after more than a year of COVID restrictions and lost revenue.
It's been a challenge. We're probably still missing well over 50% of our client base.
At midnight on October 25th, Ontario businesses requiring proof of vaccination will again be allowed to operate at full capacity, with the goal of removing all precautionary measures, masking, vaccine passports, social distancing, by the end of March.
by March, we hope we've maximized our immunization strategy in Ontario, that we have more Ontarians immunized to the point that this virus doesn't have a host in which it can reproduce.
This includes first and second doses for kids from 5 to 11 and booster shots for at least some. But there is concern the province may be jumping the gun. It's only been 2 weeks since arenas, cinemas, concert venues, and theaters opened back up to full capacity. And health experts say this plateau may not be permanent.
We need to wait still a few days until we start to understand how this last step of the reopening process actually impacts us.
Patience that could help Ontario avoid the same mistakes as other provinces, where critical care units are still struggling with the consequences of reopening too soon. Or take Finland and Denmark, two northern countries facing climbing cases after lifting most public measures.
If we do not see the numbers in a stable place, we just aren't going to do it. It's as simple as that.
Small businesses say another lockdown could be crushing.
I think it might be too late for some, but those that are able to make a go of it, this will really help.
Ontario says that any businesses that want to fully reopen will just have to enforce the vaccine passport program, something it plans to get rid of by January 17th. And if ICUs remain in good standing and case counts continue to drop off, March 28th is the day Ontarians can circle with cautious optimism for a return to normal. Jamie Mauracher, Global News, Toronto.
A 56-year-old senator from Northern Ontario is in hospital with COVID-19 despite being fully vaccinated. It's unclear how Senator José Faure-Nising contracted COVID-19. Her office confirms she was fully vaccinated earlier this year, adding the senator is grateful for the messages of support she's received and the excellent care the hospital and its staff are giving her. Faure-Nising was appointed to the Senate in 2018. Well, if you lose your job because you refuse to get a COVID-19 vaccine, you may not be eligible for employment insurance benefits. In an interview on this week's edition of the West Block, Employment Minister Carla Qualtrough explained what factors would be considered that would disqualify someone from EI.
If an employer has a clear policy with clear consequences, and it's well understood that non-compliance, so this condition of employment, could lead to dismissal. If they are dismissed, they typically would not be able to access EI for this reasons, because of course, a fundamental principle of the EI program is that claimants have to lose their employment through no fault of their own. And this would be seen typically as a choice.
There's some promising new data from Pfizer on the effectiveness of its COVID-19 vaccine in children. The company says results from its clinical trial show the vaccine is 90.7% effective at preventing symptomatic COVID-19 in children aged 5 to 11. The data was submitted to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, which is reviewing the evidence. Just over 2,200 children were part of the Pfizer trial. 750 of them were given a placebo. The rest were given a 10 microgram vaccine dose. That's 1/3 of the dose given to adults. Only 3 of the children who got the vaccine contracted COVID-19, and there were no cases of severe illness. And the company says the dosage given to children was safe. U.S. experts are set to meet next week to debate whether the Pfizer shots are safe and effective for kids. Pfizer has also submitted initial data to Health Canada, and that review is ongoing. Well, there is an update tonight on the water crisis in Iqaluit. The federal government is sending in military support. On Twitter, Public Safety Minister Bill Blair tweeted Ottawa has approved Nunavut's request for the Canadian Forces' help to provide the city's residents access to safe drinking water. Officials in Iqaluit say more tests will be underway as their investigation suggests contaminated soil and groundwater around the city's treatment plant likely seeped into the tank. The news comes 11 days after a high concentration of fuel was found in a water tank, contaminating Iqaluit's entire water supply. About 8,000 residents and Iqaluit's hospital still do not have access to clean tap water as the city works to flush contaminants out of the system. It's a family feud straight out of a movie script, but this one is playing out in the boardroom of a Canadian telecommunications giant. The leadership of Rogers and its board are in turmoil after a pocket dial to the CEO. The Globe and Mail says Joe Natale overheard the plan to oust him on an accidental call. And now a battle over who will take charge is leaving one member of the Rogers family on the outside looking in. Eric Sorensen explains.
Rogers, a telecommunications colossus founded by the late Ted Rogers, spans wireless, cable and internet to mass media and ownership of the Toronto Blue Jays. What is normally kept private in the corporate offices has spilled into public view after Edward Rogers, Ted's son, tried to replace the company's CEO Joe Natale. Soon, Rogers and other family members were on opposite sides.
And so this is a fight within the family, not a fight within general shareholders, and therefore it's quite different than what we normally see in business.
Other big names have been swept into the fray. A former Ontario Premier, David Peterson, is a board member. And the Mayor of Toronto, John Tory, a family friend who sits on the Rogers Family Trust's advisory board and tried to mediate the feud. To assert control, Edward Rogers, the company's board chairman, tried to replace 5 board members, including Peterson, with 5 new members. The board, which includes Rogers' mother and his 2 sisters, balked, then voted to replace Rogers as chair, insert board member John MacDonald in his place, and retain the board of directors. Edward Rogers, still a board member, has now moved again to replace the 5 members, this time in his capacity as chair of the family trust that controls the company's voting shares. In a statement, the Control Trust chair, Edward Rogers, says he has lost confidence in the board of Rogers Communications. Rogers' board was taken aback, stating the company is not aware of this mechanism ever having been utilized in respect of a public company in Canada, and will look into the legality of this course of action.
In all my years involved in governance and boards, I've never heard of someone being able to do this. The election of directors typically takes place at a shareholders meeting with proper notice and everything like that.
There has always been a fascination in popular culture with the personal infighting in family business empires.
I want to see what other news operations we can sweep up.
And just like a television script, the stakes are sky high because Rogers is in the midst of trying to buy Shaw Communications for $26 billion.
So how do you stop that process and change the team midstream? It just puts everything at risk. You know, Edward could not have chosen a poorer time to start a boardroom battle.
The Shaw merger would make Rogers the largest telecommunications company in the country.
The family clearly have to figure out what they're going to do. This will be a very dominant company, and we really need stability in our telecommunications companies because we rely on them so much.
Rogers' board of directors says it remains committed to merging with Shaw. But will there be a house cleaning of the board itself before that happens? Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Tragedy strikes the set of an Alec Baldwin movie. Coming up, the accident that left a director of photography dead. Plus, new charges 4 decades after a real estate heir's wife vanished. He rose to fame in the early 80s, and tonight Hollywood is mourning the loss of bosom buddies star Peter Scolari. The actor shared the screen with Tom Hanks in that series and later appeared as a self-absorbed TV producer on Newhart. Scolari won an Emmy in 2016 for his guest appearance in the HBO comedy Girls. Scolari had been battling cancer. Peter Scolari dead at the age of 66. Alec Baldwin is speaking up about a deadly incident on the set of his new movie in New Mexico. The Hollywood star pulled the trigger of a prop gun. The film's promising young cinematographer Halyna Hutchins was killed. The director was wounded. Jackson Proskow reports on the shooting and what's known about how it happened.
The New Mexico desert is now the scene of a Hollywood tragedy after a deadly accident on the set of the film Rust, involving a prop gun fired by actor Alec Baldwin. The film's cinematographer, Halyna Hutchins, was killed. Director Joel Souza injured. In a tweet, Baldwin wrote, "There are no words to convey my shock and sadness," adding, "I'm fully cooperating with the police investigation to address how this tragedy occurred." Baldwin is also a producer on the film. He was interviewed by the county sheriff's office Thursday. Variety reports the gun may have contained a live single round, citing an email allegedly sent by a film workers union to its members.
I think when people hear terms like blanks or prop guns, they assume there's no risk whatsoever. Is that the case?
That is really not the case, unfortunately.
Brian Detling is a specialist in prop firearms safety and training. He warns prop guns can be dangerous, even when loaded with blank ammunition.
Once you get within like a 5 to 10 foot range on that, that can still cause damage.
42-year-old Hutchins was considered a rising star behind the camera. Her final post to Instagram showed her riding horses on her day off in the desert.
I think word incredible is not to even begin to describe her personality. Really generous, really talented, really upbeat.
Prop gun tragedies have rocked Hollywood before. Actor Brandon Lee was killed in 1993 while filming The Crow. This latest tragedy will likely force a deeper look at on-set safety as the film industry grapples with the real risks posed by props. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
There's more major legal trouble for notorious real estate heir Robert Durst. After being convicted of killing his best friend, he's now facing charges in the death of his first wife. Kathy Durst was 29 years old when she vanished in 1982 in southern New York. Her body has never been found. Last week, Robert Durst was sentenced to life in prison in California for killing his best friend Susan Berman back in 2000. Police claim Berman helped Durst cover up his wife's murder and was about to confess her role when Durst killed her as well. Durst is 78 years old. His lawyers say he's on a ventilator in hospital after contracting COVID-19. The investigation into an international student's murder ahead, the new arrest police in Nova Scotia just made.
You're watching Global National.
There's been a breakthrough in a murder case in Nova Scotia. 2 men have been arrested in connection with the killing of Prabjot Singh Kachri. Police are searching for a third suspect. The sick man was found dead outside an apartment building in early September. Back then, family and friends wondered if it was a hate crime. Now, as Ross Lord reports, police may be one step closer to answering that question.
For 6 in Halifax, this should be a time for looking forward. An expanded temple of worship is nearing completion to better serve a growing congregation. But the Sikh community has recently been consumed with grief following last month's murder of 23-year-old Prabjot Singh Kachri at an apartment building in Truro. In the absence of any obvious motive for his fatal stabbing, Nova Scotia Sikhs have voiced concerns Prabjot Singh may have been a victim of a hate crime. Statistics Canada says violent hate crimes have increased across Canada during the pandemic. But Truro police say they've found the person responsible.
We've arrested a male, 20 years of age, from Pictou Landing First Nation. He's been arrested for murder.
2 other men have been charged with being accessories after the fact. But police say the details will have to wait until the case goes to court.
I can't speculate on the motive, so just suffice to say that we took every opportunity to look at things through all sorts of different lenses in this investigation, and looking at the lens of a hate crime, potential hate crime, was one of those lenses that we looked at.
Prabjot Singh came to Canada to study. He was working 2 jobs in Truro, sending money back to India for his single mother. His killing has spread fear throughout the Sikh community here. The Maritime Sikh Society says solving the case is crucial before it undermines Nova Scotia and Canada's reputation as a welcoming destination.
We are all feeling relieved, more hopeful that justice will be served, and all young people who are feeling very anxious and somewhat disheartened will get reassured that their lives matter.
Simardeep Hundal hopes the outcome of the murder case helps her community celebrate its new place of worship with less bitterness and anxiety than it's experienced in recent weeks. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
The 21st century, transportation space travel.
Next, when fiction meets reality. Electric vehicles will one day be the only things on the road, and the next big change to how we get around is already in production. The flying car industry is taking off, and it's a crowded, competitive field. At the forefront is a company called Opener. What began as a dream in the basement of an Ontario man's home has taken flight in California's Silicon Valley. Global's The New Reality got a behind-the-scenes look, and Donna Friesen is here with more on a Canadian television exclusive. Donna.
Flying cars are no longer fiction, they're becoming reality. A number of companies have been quietly working on them for years, and at the forefront is a Canadian, Marcus Lang. He's an engineer and inventor whose company created Blackfly. It's a personal aerial vehicle, and Lang tells us it will soon be on sale. He says he was able to produce a vehicle with a powerful electric motor that doesn't need a runway to take off and land. Blackfly is sleek and designed for just one person.
In the United States, which is our primary market, we have very serious weight restrictions. So the American vehicles have a 20-plus mile range for an operator that's 200 pounds. In Canada, we don't have those weight constraints, and also we don't have speed constraints.
For years, Lang has been quietly working in secret, trying to keep his prototype hidden. Only in the last few years has the public seen glimpses of Blackfly.
It wasn't until the first time that I saw it fly, it kind of dawned on me what possibilities there could be with this product. It was pretty incredible.
To make all this happen, Lang needed creative and innovative talent, and he recruited people from Canada. Even though he couldn't tell them what they would actually be working on, they followed him to the Silicon Valley in California. We'll have their personal stories and much more on flying cars Saturday on The New Reality.
Very intriguing. Thanks, Donna. That is Global National for this Friday night. I'm Sophie Louie. Tonight's Your Canada is Similkameen, BC. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your pictures to viewers at globalnational.com. Robin Gill will be back at the anchor desk this weekend. Have a great night.